And if you want to command, you're gonna have to learn to keep your freaky to yourself.
Hello, geeks, freaks, and all those unique. This is MC Frodis, and wow, that line from Q&A seems really, really dark now. In episode 3 of Strange New Worlds, Ghosts of Illyria, as with last week, we get a character backstory 50 years in the making. As a character pretty much relegated to the pilot episode, number 1 has always been a fascination for fans and creators alike. And here, she finally gets a chance to shine. Literally. While we're not getting a season-long arc, I'm feeling pretty comfortable saying that this season we're getting a theme. If you've seen my previous videos on Strange New Worlds, you won't be surprised to find that I think it's about grief, belonging, and coming together in a found family. Pike is struggling with his fate, Spock is grieving Michael, Laan is dealing with the trauma she suffered at the hands of the Gorn, Uhura is searching for her place after the death of her family. We get 2 more examples of that in Oona and Mbenga. Oona covers the need to belong, while Mbenga covers the grief, and they meet in the middle by both of them having terrible secrets that are directly connected to those themes. Oona's plot isn't incredibly original. It's basically Bashir's plot from the Deep Space Nine episode Dr. Bashir, I presume. What makes it different is that it's being baked right into Oona's character from the beginning. We haven't seen much from her before now. It's something that can be present in the character through her entire run, rather than being introduced halfway through with no preparation for the actor, as was the case with Alexander Siddig and Bashir. We find out that Oona has been posing as a human, but is in fact an Illyrian, a species that practices genetic modification on all of its citizens, and is thus not a part of the Federation, nor its citizens allowed in Starfleet. Now, I think this is an interesting choice for Oona. Everyone who saw the cast list knew they were going to be dealing with augments, since they had a Nooning Singh in the cast. And it would have been the really basic route to have Laan be the augment. But instead, they have her not only be another crew member, but the one who is the closest to Laan. Laan's heritage is not a secret, although that does open up a can of worms, but Oona's is. There's also this wonderful irony in that we've waited 56 years for number 1's real name, and the one that we get actually isn't her real name. While they don't mention it on the show, there's no way Oona didn't have to change her name in order to enter Starfleet pretending to be a human. This is one of the big differences in Oona's storyline and Bashir's. Bashir didn't really have to give up who he was. He lied about one aspect of himself, but it's one that he didn't even find out about until he was a teenager. He had time to establish who he was. Oona, meanwhile, had to give up absolutely everything she was in order to pursue the dream of Starfleet. Her name, her identity, her family, and even her planet. That's where the quote from Q&A comes into play. Why Oona talks about hiding her freaky. She means hiding absolutely everything about herself. For 50 plus years, she was number 1. And even now that she has the name Oona, she's still number 1. She is the uniform because she gave up everything she had to be that uniform. The only 2 characters Oona seems to be close to are Pike and Laan. Even with Pike, they seem to get along well, but I get a sense of professionalism. More Picard-Riker than Kirk and Spock. Where it is personal is with Laan, and I think one of the big relationship beats of this season, even this series, is going to be between these 2. This episode makes it clear that not only was Oona a part of Laan's rescue, but they were close. Considering Pike was unfamiliar with Laan before The Strange New Worlds, it was not so much of a professional relationship between them. They're friends, meaning Laan is the only person we really know who is friends with number 1, which makes this trail all the larger. And I think a big part of that relationship has stemmed from the fact that this episode is probably the first time they've ever discussed Laan's ancestry. Because of her own genetic modification, Oona stayed as far away from that subject as possible. It lured Laan into a false sense of security. I think, more than anything, number 1 wants to maintain her friendship with Laan. It's why she goes to her first, before even speaking to Pike. It's one of the only honest connections that number 1 has, and in the end, it's still damaged, and it's something that I think will carry through the rest of the season. But she does find out her connection with Pike is real. He doesn't give a fuck about regulations. If Starfleet kicks him out for hiding an Illyrian, I guess that's one way for him to avoid the beep chair, and at least he'd be doing what he thinks is right along the way. But I think the entry that Oona deletes at the end of the episode speaks a lot about Starfleet, more than it does her. Starfleet absolutely could find a way to shield themselves against genetically modified people. Based on Oona and Bashir, they seem to work on an honor system. And Una's right. They might let her stay in Starfleet because of all the good she's done and how she's used her genetic modifications to help the crew. The same thing happened to Bashir. It's not so much that Starfleet actually wants to ban augments as they want to say they ban augments, and if one happens to get in, oh well, they're the exception. Their presence is a net good for Starfleet, so we'll keep that rule just because of the pesky little eugenics war, but if it's inconvenient for us... This episode also features Mbenga's backstory. Keeping up with the themes of grief, Mbenga is searching for a cure for his daughter, who is terminally ill. Serving on the Enterprise allows him to go to new places with new medical techniques that might allow him to help her. Because of how critical her disease is, he is keeping her within the pattern buffer of the medical transporter, and it's this that causes the main thread of the episode. Now, I think Mbenga's plan is really poorly thought out. But when I think about it, I think that's the point. No matter how smart he is in this moment, he's just a father who's terrified his child is going to die. He's willing to do whatever it takes to help her, and this is the only solution he has at the moment. Unlike Adam Soong in Picard Season 2, hurting people is just incidental and unintentional. He's just trying to preserve her as long as he can until he can find a cure, like a heroic version of Mr. Freeze from Batman. Mbenga's daughter is why Chapel is his favorite. She's wildly experimental, so it wouldn't surprise me if she directly contributes to the cure. Because I do think Mbenga's daughter will be cured. It might not be till the end of the series, but I think it's a good out for him. We know everyone except Spock, Uhura, and Chapel will be leaving to make way for the TOS crew. And while Mbenga did appear in TOS, he does need to step down from his position of CMO. And wanting to spend time with his cured daughter is a good way to do that. And depending on how long the show goes, that's a heartbreaking story for Mbenga. To only have a few minutes with his daughter to tell bits and pieces of a story, afraid that if he lets her out of the transporter for too long, she'll slip away from him. We're starting to see more bonds form with the crew. While last week we got Spock and Uhura, this week Oona forms a bond with Mbenga, and she has her established bond with Laan tested. And I think that this is going to be the commonality throughout the first season. We're going to see the crew dealing with issues from their past that helps them develop bonds in their present, which leads to them being able to help others in the future. My review of this episode is a solid 7.5. I didn't like it as much as the 2 previous episodes, but I think those 2 episodes were almost impossible to live up to. It was still an enjoyable watch. So comment down below with your thoughts on Strange New Worlds Episode 3. If you like my videos, subscribe to my channel. If you want to support me, please visit my Patreon. You can also buy me a coffee, or you can go to my RedBubble and TeePublic to buy my geeky graphic designs. So until next time, live long, and may the Force be with you.